Hey watch friends, today we're going to be checking out a piece from the German micro brand Waldhoff, and this is their Ultramatic II. In case you missed it, recently featured an unboxing of this one as well as two of their other models, so I encourage you to go back and check that out, not only for the packaging, but you also get to see them side by side and how they compare. But for today, we're going to focus on this Ultramatic II. So with that, let's go ahead and dive straight into the specs, knock that out, and then from there we'll take a deeper dive, get a feel for what this is like to live with, look at some comps, all that kind of good stuff. So for the basic specs, this comes standard with a 2-year warranty. The case, measured from roughly the 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock position on my calipers, is coming in at 42.9 millimeters. The bezel, it does step down roughly 1 millimeter, and that's coming in at 41.9, right at that flat lip right there. The lugs are a strap change friendly 22 millimeters. The lug to lug is definitely on the longer side, coming in at 49.9 millimeters. The thickness, I'm getting thicker than they state, and I'll actually show this and talk about this extensively through the video, but this is coming in on my calipers at 12.3 millimeters, and that is including the crystal. The crystal itself is a flat sapphire crystal, which does include inner AR coating as well. One of the main showcases for this watch is going to be, of course, that tourbillon movement, which I'm sure you have already noticed there in the middle. This is from Hangzhou, and this is their HZ3415. This is a manual line movement, of course, tourbillon. It is higher beat, so 28,800 beats per hour. They have a stated spec of 72-hour power reserve. However, I actually clocked this, and I got 85 hours. That's, of course, before it fully died, so I didn't pay attention to the actual timekeeping and those kind of pieces for it. But just from start to stop was right at 85 hours, so pretty incredible there. This does not have hacking, which, without having a running secondhand, really not a big deal there anyways, but just something to be aware of. The water resistance is okay for it. It's coming in at 50 meters or 5 atmospheres, perfectly fine, I think, for the dressier style. Certainly on a larger watch, I'd expect a little higher, but there are other models actually have less, so that's not too bad. As far as the weight, on this factory included strap, it is coming in at 106.7 grams. So really right in the moderate category. For being on a leather strap, a little heavier than many, but for a relatively large watch, it's not too bad there either. Alright, so that covers the basic specs. Now let's get a better feel for this actual model. First, for the colors. This one is going to be available, as you see here today, with the black and blue version. So this one I believe they call the black sand. Blue primary, but then black accents. Additionally, there's a silver variant, there's a rose gold blue variant, and then there's additionally a rose gold green variant. So you have plenty of color options that are available. One of the main showcases with this dial is going to be texture galore. You have texture, so many varied textures on every surface you look at. It's honestly hard to capture it all. So we'll start as far as the primary dial, so what I'm calling the main portion in the middle there, where you have primarily Geneva striping, and you do have subtle brushing accents that are applied inside of that, common to Geneva striping. At the 12 o'clock position, you do have what I would call like a guilloche style sunburst pattern that's applied there as well, so that changes up the texture considerably. Around that, it has like a nice border, which encapsulates that crest, which is applied in the middle there, so that's a nice touch as well. The sub-dials each have their own texture, which they're of course prominent with having a tri-compact kind of construction there. So you've got your dual here, and then your larger for the tourbillon for the open heart for that. As far as the actual sub-dials, they each have that perimeter lip, which is a different texture in finishing for that as well. And then as you look around through there, you can see that there is a full chapter ring perimeter on there that is held in with screws, and that's a very bold, prominent chapter ring. This is definitely much wider than most others that I've seen out there. Shifting over to the hardware, the handset on this is what I would describe as being a polished, skeletonized Dauphine with facets. So it does have the crease down the middle, you do have the traditional Dauphine where it comes to points on both ends, and then of course the skeletonization with the lume accents that we'll look at momentarily. As far as the markers on this, you only have one Roman numeral, and that's going to be at the 12 o'clock position. The rest of them are going to be what I would describe as 3D trapezoids. So they do have a step slope to them as they work out towards the center, or as they work inwards towards the center of the dial, but otherwise though they are raised and do have some nice edges, get good light play for that. They do change up with the sub-dials of just being printed at the 3, 6, and 9 o'clock position, and that's in keeping with the rest of the hashes there as well. Probably would have preferred seeing a small touch of little applied indexes there just to keep in alignment with the rest, but I think it blends with the chapter ring, the rest of the chapter ring, so that's not too bad. Shifting over to the lume, as mentioned, this does have lume applied throughout. One of the things I will say is I've been a little bit underwhelmed in the overall performance of this. I had expected more of it, particularly from the handset. It's done okay, but the biggest disappointment has been that moon. While that is such a cool accent to have a loomed moon, unfortunately, as you can see here, it does have kind of that dead spot in the middle there. So that's a little bit disappointing overall, but at the end of the day, it is a dressier style watch. Shifting over to the bezel, this has a fixed bezel. It is going to be full polish. It has a step lip on the side to where it goes straight up, and then a steep slope going towards the crystal as well. Shifting over to the case, this is definitely what I would call a slab kind of construction. It is very flat, very linear as you go through there. It is broken up certainly by this milling, and the milling does play with dual texture as well. And that is actually milled in there, so that's not just an etch or just an appearance. That is actually recessed in. And I think that's a pretty cool accent. It's definitely something different than you usually see, and it very much does play with the light. As you move this around between the polish as well as the brushing, really has a lot of dynamicness to that, and that's pretty cool. As far as the lugs, they do come down sharply. They actually come down proud of the case back, and they are full polished for the lugs themselves. You're going to see a lot of polish applications as you go throughout the entirety of this. Shifting over to the 3 o'clock side, there is no crown guard on this. As for the crown itself, it's coming in at 7.3 millimeters. It is a push-pull construction, which I think is in keeping with the manual wind, so that is to be expected there. The milling on it, as you can see, it does sit nice, proud off of the case, and then the milling is a coin edge there. And it is signed on the outside. You can see their crest is laid in there. That has nice milling to that as well, and dual use of texture, so I think that's well done. As far as the case back, the case back on this is held in with screws. So it's not a screw in, it actually has screws. It has a very large, so a prominent exhibition window. And that is very welcome because this movement is absolutely gorgeous. I love the kind of radial Geneva striping that it has going through there, the overall accents that it has. Just really think it's an attractive movement to look at, and especially with having that peek through window where you can see the tourbillon from both sides so you get the full skeletonization. That's a great touch. What I could live without is it does have full polishing accents all the way through, so just like many of the rest of the surfaces, this is a fingerprint magnet. Shifting over to the bracelet, the strap on this comes standard with a leather strap. It is 22 millimeters at the lugs, and it does taper down at the clasp to 20 millimeters. The leather is what I would call an alligator kind of texture, though I don't believe it's actually an alligator for that. It has quick release spring bars, so that is nice if you want to change these out, and with having the standard strap size, that's going to be easy to do. I will note, as you can see here in the wrist footage, this does, in my opinion, sit tall on the wrist. So not only the actual case itself, and then of course the leather, which this isn't broken in, and I don't actually wear leather myself, so I didn't really spend a whole heck of a lot of time with this, for full disclosure there. But that, this strap, that is, not the watch. But that being said, that is definitely something to be aware of, is it does, I think, especially for the dressier style, sit tall, but we'll talk about that more. The clasp on this is going to be a deployant clasp. So what you do is you just floss this through, just like regular. So this actually has what looks like screws. This is a double pusher. And then you just put the strap through, put your pin in there, and then it just closes up. So a traditional deployant kind of configuration there. And that has worked just fine. It does thicken up the bottom some, but that's pretty much always the case with deployant clasps. All right, so now that we have all that out of the way, let's go ahead and shift over and look at some comps. And none of these are really intended to actually be comps. One of the things I just wanted to talk about or focus on was specifically the thickness. As I mentioned, this is only coming in on calipers at 12.3 millimeters, so it really is not too thick. However, let's take this as an example. This is one we recently looked at. This is the Alto 8 Roto. This one, on calipers, including that crystal, and it is a domed crystal, is coming in at 12.5 millimeters. However, as you can see here, a huge difference in perceived thickness. So while you're going from the raw spec of overall thickness, roughly 12.3 and roughly 12.5, you can see it is a huge difference. Now the case on this is only around 9 millimeters. This has a flat crystal, this has a dome crystal, but I just wanted to illustrate the effect there, that you do get a very different feel beyond the specs, because I know people a lot of times get hung up on that. Here's another one. This is the Dorenzo Aerolite, and then here's looking at them head to head rather. But the main thing, again, just want to look at the side. This Aerolite stated spec total, or actually on my calipers rather, total is coming in at 11.4 millimeters, so about 1 millimeter thicker, or thinner rather, But to me, this still just has a lot thicker of a feel. And that's just really kind of the optics. And then this one really has no comparison to it. It is a 40mm dive style watch. However, this RZE Endeavor I wanted to bring in because this is right at 12.5mm. But again, look at that though. 12.5 versus 12.3. To me, with having kind of these Henta style kind of facets and sharp angles there and just breaking it up versus that slab, I actually think this looks thinner in many respects, especially the way that it wears on wrist, because as we saw, this wears fairly thickly. So I just wanted that to be understood and appreciated here, because that is one of my biggest knocks for this watch, and we'll talk about that as we get to the critique section, which with that, let's go ahead and shift over and wrap things up with my personal view of the positives, some critiques, as well as the summary. First, for the positives. This is relatively affordable for a tourbillon, and we'll get to the price here in just a moment. But that being said, tourbillons are usually quite expensive. This, of course, is a Chinese variant for that. However, it is still definitely on the cheaper side as tourbillons go. The textures, taken in isolation, the textures themselves I think are actually attractive. You know, I like each of the different finishes. I'm not necessarily sold on all of them being together, as we'll talk about here in the critique section, but I do think individually they're overall well done. The exhibition window, as we saw, the exhibition window is very welcome. I like the fact that that showcases that large but very well done movement. So I think that's a nice touch there. And then on the movement, watching that tourbillon, we got to take a look at that again. Check that out. I mean, just seeing that thing go through, absolutely gorgeous, really entrancing to watch that. So I enjoyed that. That's a nice touch. And then the color, I personally enjoy it. You know, I think it is a nice blue coloration for that. Sometimes will look almost black as it picks up darkness, and then otherwise gets a pretty vibrant blue to that, so I think that's a good touch. But shifting over to the critiques, unfortunately I do have a fair amount of them. We've already talked about the fact that this sits tall. For being a dressier style watch, I will say it's a little bit off-putting. I do think that there are things that they could have done to kind of slim this out. If they had done some more contouring and different things to the case, that would have really slimmed it out. But with being a dressier style watch, I understand there's movement limitations plus the handset and everything else for this, that there's only so much they could do, but I do think visually they could have slimmed it out because the 12.5 isn't necessarily that bad, or 12.3 isn't that bad, but it does wear thickly. Overall, I will say, you know, I've seen many comments to this effect already. This is extremely busy. There's a lot going on. Not everybody's going to like that. I've seen tacky, I've seen gaudy, all those kind of things out there as far as commentary for it. You know, I understand what they were going for. I do wonder if this is one of those situations where less would have been more for that as far as the overall finishing. The same thing is true for the polishing. You know, polish accents can be nice. However, this is very, very generous with polish. And with having a slab kind of case, yes, it's broken up with the milling, which is appreciated, but there's still a lot of polish that's going on with this watch. It is a fingerprint magnet for that reason. And similarly, I know not everybody loves polish, so that's something to be aware of. But the biggest thing is, I've got to say, for the price point, and this one is coming in at around $1,600, at $1,600, the finishing is a bit disappointing, and it could just be this sample because this is a loaner to the channel. But that being said, I did notice some definite flaws here. Let's take a look and see if we can pick it up. So at the roughly 1 o'clock or 1:30 position, check out down in that Geneva stripe, you can see there's a pretty notable flaw there. And that's running right down the middle. I initially thought it was just the way the light was hitting it, but no, that's definitely down there in the finish. That's a bummer. Then additionally, if we look at the tourbillon, let's go ahead and actually move the handset out of the way. If we look at the top of the chapter ring, sorry, hitting the camera there, you can see right there, there's definitely a very noticeable nick in that. And I'm not saying it's huge, but again, $1,600 watch. And then as we saw earlier, the lume with having kind of that dead spot in the middle there, that's all pretty disappointing. And I would expect more if I'm going to spend this much money on a microbrand tourbillon or not. So that's definitely something to be aware of. I hope that this is just a one-off and just specific to this sample, but it's something that I saw, so I of course got to bring it to your attention. So where does that leave us overall? At the end of the day, I appreciate what they were going for. I appreciate the ambition for this and that they're trying to bring an upmarket luxury style to the microbrand space. Having an affordable tourbillon, all those kind of things are great. However, there's definitely some things that I would like to see improved, as well as the overall design isn't necessarily resonating completely with me, especially on my 6.5-inch wrist, definitely on the larger side. So at the end of the day, it's your choice to make, but I hope this feedback has helped you overall to make your decision. If it did, as always, please do tap that like button. And if you haven't already done so, smash that subscribe button. I'll have 2 more coming from them. And additionally, I'll of course always have new ones coming. Thanks for watching.